just got a YouTube alert about it.
Hi, audience of the Carter Center Forum on Women, here at the Carter Center in Atlanta, broadcasting here from Atlanta, where we just got power back yesterday after Hurricane Irma, and we are so glad to be on the air with our guest, Lisa Sharon Harper. Lisa Sharon Harper is an amazing woman. I've met her just a few years ago through Sojourners in Washington, D.C. Sojourners really helps people of faith put their faith into action. You have Sojourners magazine. It's really a forum and a hub for conversations for people of faith to talk about putting their faith into action. And Lisa was the chief church engagement officer there until recently. And now her project, freedomroad.us, is going to be launching in late October. It's a very exciting project. I cannot wait to hear about it from Lisa. First, let me just introduce Lisa briefly. Apart from that, she is an activist, an author, a theologian, and her new book, The Very Good Gospel, How Everything Wrong Can Be Made Right. We all need this, right? We all need this right now. I think you must agree with me. So go out and buy this book. And Lisa's going to talk to us today about what, in the process of writing this book, she was very active, very involved in social justice work, and bridging these worlds of faith, community, commitment, and social justice. So I'm going to turn it right over to Lisa and get started here. Lisa, you know, sometimes when we talk about putting faith into action, we put ourselves at risk, our own selves at risk. And President Carter, who has really led that effort here at the Carter Center, but really starting as a governor, when he stood up in the state of Georgia, and as governor said, the time for segregation is over.
Yeah.
He went into the White House saying human rights would be the center of foreign policy, of his foreign policy. He took a lot of risks speaking truth to power since he left the White House. So he has really brought that energy to the Carter Center, and we have been convening human rights defenders here at the Carter Center for 25 years, really with this idea that people who put themselves on the front line of the struggle for justice are very brave people. We need to listen. We need to really honor the work of such brave individuals, listen to what they've learned, and have to tell us about how do we really, really change the world we are living in. And as Lisa pointed out when talking about this book, remember, this is the book, The Very Good Gospel. This is from a Christian perspective, but it's for all of those who want more from this world. So we can all, whether we are people of faith or whether we are humanists with an ethical framework that we work through a secular framework of human rights, we are all in this together. So Lisa, you know, recently, there are two things I wanted to ask you about with your recent experiences. You joined a group with Sojourners to protest the death penalty in front of the Supreme Court, and I watched it live. I watched when you guys were arrested. I want you to talk about that, and I want you to also talk about your experience in Charlottesville, joining religious leaders there, standing up against white supremacy. You have so much to tell us about these experiences and what they've taught you.
Well, thank you, first of all, Karen, for having me. This is such a huge honor. I can't even believe that I'm talking with you right now for the Carter Center Forum on Women. It's a huge honor. And also, I want to just say, what you just said about listening to those who are on the front lines is really, I think, critical. Because I met so many people at the Forum for Human Rights, the Human Rights Defenders Forum, that I learned so much from, because there's a level of wisdom that comes from the confrontation with evil. And those who have direct confrontation with evil systems, evil structures, evil within other human beings, have a level of understanding of that evil and how it works in society that really begs our attention. We need to learn from them. So I have been blessed, actually, I believe, to be on those front lines a few times, and I'm happy to talk about it with you today. So the first question you asked was about the death penalty action. January 17th, the DC 17, no, DC 18, might be 19, forgive me, got arrested. It was DC 18, got arrested on the steps of the Supreme Court in order to protest the reality that the death penalty has been now in force for now 40 years. And in fact, this was going to be the 40th anniversary of the reinstatement of the death penalty in the modern era was on that day, January 17th. And there was a person who was scheduled to be executed in Virginia the following day. And so we were protesting in order to hopefully move the court to offer a stay of execution, which they did not. So that person died. And I think that the thing that, I mean, look, when I was in high school, my senior year project in high school for Mrs. Sorensen with her red pen was actually a thesis paper on the death penalty. And so my work my senior year was to figure out what do I think about the death penalty? Is it just? Is it something that we should be supporting? Is it something we shouldn't? And what I found in that high school research was, and this is back in the 1980s, y'all. Okay, so I'm dating myself, whatever, there you go. But this is back in the 1980s, right? So this is in the 80s, and it's very soon after the death penalty was reinstated. What I found was that the death penalty it's unjust because it is inequitably applied across different races. You have, and also economics. If you are poor, you are multiple times more likely to be sentenced to death than if you are rich. Not because you're rich or poor, but because you can't afford the kind of defense that would actually prove your innocence, even if you are innocent. Right. And then also, the death penalty is such a final, it's an absolutely final judgment. It cannot be reversed once exacted or once executed. No pun intended. So we better be darn sure. We better have a 100% accuracy rate if we are going to exact the death penalty. But the reality is that there are hundreds of people who have been exonerated and found, even posthumously found, not guilty after they've been executed, or thankfully before. So, and especially now with DNA evidence. So we can't, as a society, claim to have all knowledge in a way that matches the level of finality of this judgment. So I think, and again, in another whole way, it's unjust. So that's why I put my body out as a living sacrifice, as Paul would say in Romans, to present your body as a living sacrifice. And I think that that's been my spiritual practice. It's been my spiritual practice to put my body in the way, to make holy trouble, good kind of trouble, as John Lewis would say, right? So to use what I can. And in these moments, these are the only instruments that I had to use, my body.
So tell us what happened when you were there, standing there with the other protesters. You were standing in front of the Supreme Court, not blocking any roads. There was no problem with people walking around you if they needed to, right? You were just standing there with a sign. Right. And what happened?
So actually what happened was what we did is we dropped flowers, 2 colors of roses, red and yellow, one to represent the color of, or one to represent the victims and one to represent the perpetrator, because both are victims of the system and both are victims within this equation. And we walked up to the struts and we unfurled the sign that you see on your screen right now. And we stood and we sang "This Little Light of Mine." And we sang, "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round." And we sang, "We Shall Overcome." And we chanted, and basically what we did was we lifted again, we placed our bodies in the place of public witness to bear witness to the fact that what we are allowing to be done in our names by the state is sin. And we say no. So what happened was about a half hour, I would say, though nobody was looking at their watch, but about a half hour into the protest, police began to arrest us one by one, starting over to the left of us, the right of your screen, with the first person and then working their way down. They handcuffed us and they walked us down the stairs and they took us in. And that moment for me was really powerful because I remember singing. I think we were singing "This Little Light of Mine" at that time, and there was something it felt like you were singing to the powers. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, even in the light of this darkness of our world. Even though we live in a world where people are dying because the state is saying, I want them to die, and I don't. But I'm going to let my light shine, and this is the one little way I have to do it, so I'm going to do it.
Well,
even if it is, I'm breaking some ordinance that is not actually a just ordinance.
So then you were arrested, and then where were you taken?
We were taken to the to the processing center, which is just underneath the Supreme Court, and then shipped. When we were all processed, we were all taken to the Central County Jail system, the city jail, which is underground. We were 3 stories underground, and it was incredibly hot. I mean, it was probably about 98 degrees in that place, and extremely dark and dank. The women were separated, so me and my cellmate, we were placed in one cell together, and then throughout the night, other women filled in the cells around us. Actually, 3 grandmothers were arrested that night. 3 separate grandmothers, all for slapping their grandchildren. Can you imagine? All of them Black. There was only one white person in the jail, in the women's jail, and that was a white woman who was strung out on drugs. Everybody else in there was Black, and that was just really striking. And for the men's cells were filled, and they also were all Black. Throughout the night, we had, I hate to say this, trigger alert. We had roaches crawling throughout the cells. It is inhumane. Every single night, people are taken off the street and placed in hell. I mean, it is literally like purgatory. I remember sitting there thinking, this feels like purgatory. There's no clock. You can't tell what time it is. The guards will actually trick you and tell you that it's later than it is, so that later when they tell you the real time, you're totally disappointed. That happened to us once. But we counted 52 roaches that crawled across our cell in the course of the night, and we killed. There was a man who was downstairs. They were in the level just below ours. They counted 101 roaches come through their cell. The city jails in DC are infamous for being roach infested. So the thing that really struck me is that for breaking an unjust ordinance, for unfurling the flag that you see on your screen, we were treated as if we are criminals before we ever went to trial. We were placed in jail. And quite honestly, if any of us had any medical emergencies, it really totally could have, it would have been because we unfurled a flag. And we weren't even found guilty. So I don't want to go too far into like all the details, but it basically just struck me that every single night we put people below ground where they're covered with roaches throughout the night, and it's 98 degrees and hardly any light, and they have to go to the bathroom in public because there is no private bathroom. There's just the toilet in your cell, and it's a cage, literally a cage. A steel cage, and they have not been proven guilty. Yet we're supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, but we're treated as if we're guilty before found guilty.
That's an amazing experience to witness that and bring it to us, to be able to really testify, to what you experienced, and also, I know that you joined the march in Charlottesville. I was watching Reverend Tracy Blackman's live stream while you all were driving in the car, and there were these men with the polo shirts, and she was talking about this, and I kept thinking to myself, they look like zombies. There's this army of
Yeah.
of these people walking and shouting these horrible, vile things. So tell us about your experience with Reverend Tracy Blackman, Dr. Cornel West. There was an amazing, wonderful, beautiful line, and I think we have the photo there. And you're on the left, on our left, with the orange sash. Tell us what that was like, and what did you know? I think Charlottesville may be a turning point in a way, I would say, for white people, because white people, I'll just speak from, my fellow white people, that I think white people in this country, these are the kinds of things like when Trayvon Martin happened, or when Michael Brown, and myself as a mother of a son who's mixed race and would never be confused for being white. And knowing he goes out in a hoodie at night, Trayvon Martin for me was a absolute earth-shattering moment. I think Charlottesville for white folks is one of those moments, because it's so disappointing that I think an important wake-up call, because people of color and marginalized people have known this. This is not news. So for us, for the white folks, it is a shift, I think, to see that this could happen in 2017 in America. So tell us what it was like. There was the church service on Friday night, August 11th, Saturday morning. The experience. What was that like, and what did you experience, and what did you learn from it?
Well, first, I want to just say thank you so much to the organizers of the Charlottesville action, the clergy action in particular, but all of the organizers that came out in order to protest the uprising, really, or rising up of white nationalism within our nation, and just to say that is not who we are, and that is not who we want to be as a nation. It is who we have been, but it is not who we want to be. And if there is a time for us to declare who we will be, it is now. And so I want to say thank you to Tracy Howe Wispelway and Seth Wispelway and Reverend Brittany Kane Conley. I mean, they were the lead organizers for the clergy march. And then, of course, to Reverend Sekou, who was, he's on the far left of the screen right now, who was one of the primary trainers. They were fabulous. And they really did help us to understand the reality we were walking into. When I got off the train from DC to come into Charlottesville for the mass prayer meeting that night, Seth met me, and he told me immediately that, well, what we understand is that the police are telling us not to march, but we are going to march because we're going to exercise civil disobedience today, because the reality is that we have to bear witness. We have to actually bear witness of another way of being in this world at this time. But the reality is that anybody who goes out on that street is risking not only arrest, but also possible death. And so all of us knew we were going into that. We knew that. But there was also a strong sense of a call to exercise nonviolent disobedience, civil disobedience, in order to bear public witness. So that night we had a prayer meeting, and in the midst of our prayer meeting, Reverend Tracy Blackman, gave, I think, honestly, the sermon of her life. She preached her head off. And what she did was she really broke down how we got here, and how do we get out of this place. And what she talked about was the reality that in the past, we thought we won. We thought we won the fight against racism when abolition was declared won, with the Civil War and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And we thought we won with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We thought we won when Obama became president, but each time we actually failed to get at the root. She actually talked about David and Goliath, and she talked about how David cut off the head of Goliath, and that's what we have failed to do. We failed to cut off the head of racism in America, and so it keeps, rising back up like a zombie and walking among us. And isn't it interesting that that night after the sermon, and I spoke, actually, I gave a final charge talking about how when we entered the street the next day, we were going to be entering into darkness. But one thing we know, and I know this because of the study I did for the Very Good Gospel, scripturally on the first page of the Bible, it starts with chaos and it starts with darkness. But we know something about God. God cuts darkness. God limits darkness with light. God limits the chaos with land. And all God needs to do is to speak it into existence. And so we can stand on that that is what God does. And so even in this dark moment, we actually have a promise. We have assurance from God that because God is, this darkness too shall pass. Mm. And so after I sat down, we got word that our church had been surrounded by white nationalists that had come to intimidate us, and they were carrying torches. And it was a little intimidating. But I also have to say that after that night where we heard Cornel West and Tracy Blackman and also Sekou sang his head off that night, and me giving the final charge, we were all filled. We were filled with the Spirit. And so there was a way that, it was like, all right, okay, God has got us in this. So we held people in the church for a little longer, and eventually folks were able to go. But there was one woman who she exited at one point when we thought it was safe, and she ended up getting, I believe, maced or pepper sprayed by white nationalists who were outside. That was kind of a wake up call. Again, this is for real, and these people did not come just to throw signs. They came to take back America for themselves. And they were not running according to any kind of nonviolence principles. So that night, the tape that you saw with Tracy Blackman, we were actually going to pick up Brian McLaren's car. He was also there with us, and he had gotten there a little bit late because of a train delay, I believe. But because he'd gotten there late, he had to park like a mile away from the church. So we were driving to drop him off at his car, and we had to drive through a bunch of white nationalists who were walking away from the rally that had just happened. There were thousands actually that were there for that rally, and they're basically surrounding our car. I've never felt, it was surreal. It was surreal because you look into that crowd and you see people who could be sitting next to you on the bus. You wouldn't know that this person just came from a torch rally for a Nazi movement, but they were wearing khakis and white polos. And one guy walking down the street, I swear, I thought, he looks like he belongs in a boardroom. He probably is in somebody's boardroom. That was striking. And then the next day, you see the picture. We walked out onto the street in 2x2s at first, and then when we got close to the park, which is where you see this picture, we fanned out and took up the perimeter of the street. We're not locking arms just for the sake of a picture. We were locking arms because that's what we were trained to do. Because by locking arms, you actually are stronger together. So we walked toward the park, and we fanned out across the edge of the park, and actually just stood in one long line of 80 clergy. And we sang "This Little Light of Mine," and we're going to let it shine even in the midst of darkness, because darkness will win if no light shines. That's why we had to be there to bear witness.
Wow, that's an amazing story, Lisa, and how brave you all were to go ahead and go out, even though you'd seen it the night before, because it was scary watching on Facebook. And also a shout out to a good friend of mine named Walter Heinecke, who was one of the organizers of the counter protesters. His students were the ones around the Jefferson Memorial that were surrounded by the torch wielding mob on Friday night.
God bless them.
And that, I think you're right. I think the people who stood up, and it created an image for us that apparently we needed. And so tell us, from these experiences and from your work on the book, for those just joining us, The Very Good Gospel, how everything wrong can be made right, because we know that there is more, that we long for more, and we have to access it. So tell us about the book, and then tell us about freedomroad.us, which is such an exciting project.
I'm excited for it. Well, all of this for me really stems from a deep dive in the biblical concept of shalom, which at the heart of it believes that the peace of all depends on the peace of all. Like, in other words, you can't have peace over here if there's no peace over here. If one person is down, then we can't claim that everything is well. It is not well. That person is down. And so in that investigation, I found in the first page of Genesis, you actually have a declaration that for me becomes the center of my ethic, my Christian ethic, which is the reality that we are all made in the image of God. And the implication of that in the text is that we are all then created with a divine call and the capacity, if all things are actually equitable, to exercise stewardship of the world, to protect the world together, to serve the world together, to make decisions that impact the world together. But the lie that we have been told by our legal constructs, and particularly by the spirit of colonization that has permeated our world honestly, since you see it actually rise up in Genesis with the different empires that have risen up, the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Assyrian Empire. I mean, all of these empires that try to exact colonization. Well, in America, and when we look at the Western world and that empire, one of the prime ways that they controlled society was through the construct of race. It's a political construct. It's a construct that's meant to do one thing. It's meant to discern or to decide who is called by God to exercise dominion, to exercise stewardship of the land. But we know that to be human is to have that call. But we have had laws and policies and structures put in place in our society that have said to us, only some of us are human. Only some of us are fully human. Some of us are not human at all. My own ancestors were counted as chattel in slave schedules, along with pitchforks and horses. So there's a call now to renounce that lie and to go back to the truth that we are all created with the call of God and the capacity to exercise stewardship of the world. And if that was the truth, if we really believe that as a society, how would our policies then change? How would we govern differently? How would we structure the school system? We wouldn't be satisfied with some students, some children having books and others not, some having AP classes and others not. We would be preparing every single person in the world to lead. And so the call of the church, I believe, in these times is to embrace the ethic of the image of God in Scripture in order to find shalom and shadows of shalom among us and to rebuild the kingdom of God, the shalom, peaceable kingdom of God on earth and within our different communities and our nation.
And you were involved with this initiative called The Declaration. Tell us about that and how can people get involved in that?
Yes, go to thedeclaration.net and you can read it for yourself. It's a declaration of the church that we will no longer comply, we will no longer be complicit with the logics and the spirit of colonization in our land. And that spirit claims humanity, human personhood for only a certain subset of the people who live in our nation, and therefore thriving only for the self at the expense of others. We say no more. Thriving is meant for all humanity and for the earth. And so we need to actually protect the inherent dignity of all humanity. And that we do through our communities, through our interactions with each other, and through our public policy. So go to thedeclaration.net, and you can also check out different ways people have been talking about it at #thedeclaration. And freedomroad.us, and I was actually one of the drafters, along with a beautiful, amazing process that opened up the drafting process to about 20, maybe even more. I mean, who knows, because it was on a Google Doc and people were anonymous, different people to contribute to that document. And then it was narrowed down to about 10 of us in the last 2 weeks to really kind of edit and push it out. But freedomroad.us exists to help us to shrink the narrative gap in the United States, that gap between the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and how we got here and where we then need to go in order to find shalom with each other. And we do that by convening conversations and experiences that lead to common understanding, common commitment, and common action. So in October, we'll be launching online, and you can reach us at freedomroad.us. Until then, you can always reach me at my email, lisa@lisasharonharper.com.
Wow, that's a lot of great stuff, a lot of wonderful ways for people to get involved. And I also want to reiterate here at the Carter Center Forum on Women, Religion, Violence, and Power, we have a series of roundtable discussions like this one. We have one coming up later in September, I believe, with Arno Michaelis, who is a former skinhead, former white nationalist, who himself is going about trying to convert, bring some of those men back over to the light using his experience. We will have another one with Julie Bindel and Rachel Moran, who is a survivor of prostitution, sex trade, in October 26th, talking about efforts to really a different kind of abolition of the sex trade. That's coming up in October 26th. So this place where you're watching this broadcast right now is host to a number of very exciting and wonderful conversations. This conversation with you, Lisa Sharon Harper, was fantastic. I'm so proud to know you. Thank you for your witness and for your risks that you have taken. And thank you for coming to the Carter Center twice, at least, to be with us and share your wisdom and your friendship. So to everyone out there, go to thedeclaration.net, go to freedomroad.us, but most importantly, go to Amazon or wherever your bookstore is and get yourself a copy of The Very Good Gospel by Lisa Sharon Harper. Thank you so much for being with us, Lisa.
Thank you, Karen. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.